The sale happened before the sun had fully lifted itself over the fields, when the ground still held the night's cold, and the breath of the mules steamed white in the air. Christmas morning in Mississippi, 1863, arrived without celebration in the quarters. There was no singing, no extra bread, no pause from fear, only the sound of boots moving where they did not usually go. They were taken behind the smokehouse, a place meant for storing meat through winter, not for standing children. 12 of them were arranged in a loose line, coats borrowed from older hands, collars pulled high. Someone had washed their faces the night before, careful to scrub away soot and tears alike. Clean children sold better. Everyone knew this, even those too young to say it aloud. The boy who tells this story stood near the end of the line. He did not cry. He had learned early that tears drew attention, and attention brought trouble. Instead, he watched. He noticed how the master's ledger was held close to the chest, as though it were a Bible. He noticed the way the master's voice softened when speaking to white men and hardened again when he turned away. Most of all, he noticed who was not there. No mothers, no older sisters, no fathers allowed to stand near enough to be seen. The buyers arrived quietly, as if ashamed of the hour. They spoke of work and good hands, avoiding the word child. One man lifted a girl's chin with a finger, not unkindly, as if inspecting a horse's teeth. Another asked the boy his age. When the answer came, the man nodded without surprise. Numbers mattered more than names. Coins changed hands, then paper. Each mark of the pen sounded loud in the still air. The boy counted them without meaning to. 12 names entered. 12 lives crossed out of one place and written into another. When the last mark was made, the master closed the book and exhaled, as though a burden had been set down. Only then did the church bell ring in the distance, late, thin, and far away. The boy thought how strange it was that a sound meant for joy arrived only after everything had already been decided. As the wagons pulled away, he stood still, memorizing faces, coats, voices, directions of travel. He did not know why he was remembering. He only knew that forgetting would be a kind of death, and he intended to endure. By nightfall, the wagons were long gone, and the plantation seemed to shrink in on itself, as though the land knew something had been taken from it. The quarters were quieter than the boy had ever known them. 12 voices missing made a sound of their own. He lay awake on his pallet, staring at the low rafters, listening to the careful breathing of those who remained. No one spoke the children's names. Speaking them felt dangerous, as if the wind itself might carry the words to the wrong ears. The boy had been overlooked that morning, not because he was strong or valuable, but because he was small and kept his eyes lowered. He had learned that stillness could be mistaken for obedience. While others trembled or wept, he watched. While others begged in whispers, he counted steps and measured distance. The master had passed him by with a brief glance, seeing only what he expected to see: another child who would last the winter. That evening, the boy was sent to carry water to the big house, a task usually given earlier in the day. The timing mattered to him. He noticed such things. Inside, the lamps were already lit, casting long shadows across the walls. The master sat at the table alone, his coat still on, his boots unpolished, a plate cooling in front of him. There was no laughter, no talk of holiday visitors. The house felt hollow, as if something essential had been removed. From the doorway, the boy paused, as custom required, waiting to be addressed. The master did not look up at first. When he did, his eyes passed over the child without focus, as though the boy were part of the furniture. "Set it there," he said, nodding toward the sideboard. His voice held no triumph, only wariness. As the boy obeyed, he listened. He heard the master mutter about debts and timing, about the war and prices falling. He heard regret, not for the children, but for how long he had waited to sell. The words settled into the boy's memory, heavy and exact. He understood then that men spoke more freely when they believed themselves unobserved. When the task was done, the boy did not hurry away. He took one last look at the room. The ledger left open on the table, the ink still fresh, the chair across from the master left empty. He did not know what would come of these details, only that they mattered. That night, as the master ate alone, he believed himself unseen and unjudged. He did not notice the child moving quietly through the dark, carrying water and carrying truth with equal care. The boy said nothing. He did not need to. He had learned that patience, once set in motion, could outlast even a master's certainty. The next day dawned gray and windless, and the plantation did not wake as it usually did. The boy noticed it at once. Mornings always carried sound. Children sent on errands, quick feet on packed earth, low humming meant to steady the hands. This morning had none of it. The air sat heavy, as though the land itself were holding its breath. Work went on, but without rhythm. Adults moved more slowly, speaking only when required. Tasks that once took an hour stretched into 2. No one scolded the boy for lingering near the fence line, staring down the road where the wagons had gone. There was nothing left to see, yet his eyes returned there again and again, as if memory might bring something back. At the big house, the change was sharper still. The master's wife remained upstairs longer than usual, her door closed, the servants careful not to disturb her. Meals were served without comment and cleared untouched. The boy carried trays and fetched wood, moving through rooms that felt colder despite the fire. He noticed how often chairs stood empty, how the master paused before speaking, as though expecting an answer that never came. That afternoon, the master walked the grounds alone. He stopped near the quarters, then turned away, his hands clasped behind his back. The boy watched from a distance. He had seen that posture before, when the master weighed numbers in his mind. Yet now the figures did not seem to settle. There were no children's voices to soften the edges of the day, no small tasks to distract from larger thoughts. Silence had a way of pressing inward. At supper, the master tried to speak of ordinary things, the weather, the fields, the coming year. His words fell flat. Even he seemed to hear it. He pushed his plate away and stood before finishing, leaving the room without excuse. The sound of his steps echoed longer than they should have. That night, lamps were extinguished early. The boy lay awake again, listening. The quiet felt different now, not fearful, but watchful. He understood that absence could accuse as strongly as presence. 12. Missing children left gaps no amount of order could fill. Every silence pointed back to Christmas morning. The boy did not rejoice in this change. He felt no triumph. He only observed. He learned that cruelty did not end when its work was done. It lingered, shaping rooms and meals and thoughts. The master had gained money, yet lost something he could not name, and the house itself seemed to know it. In that stillness, the boy held his memories close. He sensed, though he could not yet explain it, that a reckoning had begun, not with noise or force, but with emptiness. And emptiness, once settled in, was difficult to drive away. The change did not come suddenly, nor did it announce itself. It arrived in pieces, quiet as dust settling. The boy noticed first that visitors stopped coming. Men who once shared the master's table found reasons to pass by the gate without turning in. Letters arrived less often, and when they did, they were read twice and folded away with care. The master began to ride into town more frequently, returning later each time, his jaw set, his coat smelling of cold air and restraint. Whispers moved faster than wagons. The sale of children on Christmas Day had been spoken of, first behind doors, then aloud in places where reputations were weighed. Even in a time hardened by war and want, there were lines some believed should not be crossed so openly. The master had crossed one. and now others measured the distance between him and themselves. The boy carried water and messages as before, his manner unchanged. He listened. He learned which words stirred unease: contracts, debts, inquiries. He learned that a ledger, once trusted, could be examined again under a different light. The master argued with unseen men, pacing rooms, counting and recounting figures that no longer aligned. The price he had gained for the children did not stretch as far as he had planned. One afternoon, a stranger arrived, well-dressed and careful in his speech. He stayed longer than expected. When he left, the master sat alone at the table, the ledger closed at last. That evening, no orders were given. Work continued the next day, but without direction, as if the hand guiding it had weakened. The boy understood then that punishment did not always arrive as a blow. Sometimes it came as isolation, as loss of standing, as doors that no longer opened. The master was not dragged from his home. No crowd gathered. Yet something essential had shifted. His authority, once assumed, now required effort. Effort weighed on him. By winter's end, land was sold. A horse was let go. The household grew smaller, quieter. The master spoke less and listened more, though too late for listening to matter. He had believed his actions would vanish with the season, forgotten like frost on the fields. Instead, they had taken root. The boy felt no satisfaction in this. He did not smile at the master's decline. He only noted it, the way he noted weather and time. He had learned that truth, once observed and carried forward, did not need hands to act. It moved through people and places on its own. What happened that Christmas night did not end with darkness? It stretched onward, measured not in hours, but in consequence. And the boy, still small and silent, bore witness to every step. The boy remained. Seasons turned, and with them his body lengthened, his voice deepened. Yet he kept the habit of watching more than speaking. Names of the lost children stayed with him, held carefully, like small objects that might break if handled too roughly. He repeated them only in his thoughts, marking time by who would have been older, who might have learned to read, who would have run ahead on summer mornings. Life narrowed, then widened again. The plantation changed hands. Rules shifted. Some faces disappeared, others arrived. Through it all, the boy carried what he had seen, not as a weapon, but as a weight he had learned to balance. Survival, he understood, was not always escape. Sometimes it was remembrance, quiet and exact. On certain nights, when the wind moved through the empty yard, he thought of that Christmas morning and the sound of the ledger closing. Silence returned then, the same silence that had followed the wagons down the road. It no longer frightened him. He had learned its meaning. Memory, like the land, kept its own record. It asked nothing and forgave nothing. And as long as he lived, the children sold at dawn were not entirely gone, for they endured where voices had once been taken. This story is a work of fiction inspired by historical contexts and is not presented as a verified historical account.